everyone else to contribute. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. I rise to support the statement by the chair of my Energy Committee. Mr. Speaker, just as a way of illustration, this afternoon, I had my assistant purchase a 100 shilling token, Mr. Speaker. This is the average token that is purchased by a Nairobi hustler. Mr. Speaker, out of 100 shillings, we were only able to purchase 3.9 units of electricity. The token amount out of the 100 is 49.13 shillings, meaning, Mr. Speaker, 51% of the money that a hustler uses to buy electricity goes to taxes and levies. Out of that, the fuel energy charge, the fuel charge is 27 shillings, Mr. Speaker. And the problem has been highlighted very well and capably by the chairperson, that in fact this country entered into very expensive deals, these take-or-pay deals with independent power producers that rely on thermal energy to produce this energy, electricity, that is finishing our people, Mr. Speaker. So here in Nairobi, for instance, the most critical case is the case of the people of Mukuru kwa Ruben, Mr. Speaker. They have to rely on informal power connections because these former and current employees of KPLC, especially at the Nairobi South office, they are the ones who have forced the people of Mukuru to rely on electricity that is informally supplied. There is such rampant, stealing and theft of electricity equipment, including transformers, including meters, and there is simply no reliable electricity in Mukuru. Mr. Speaker, during the campaign, we were there and we saw for ourselves, for every 2 minutes that a person in Kwaruben, Mr. Speaker, just 1 minute, every 2 minutes that a person in Kwaruben receives electricity, 5 minutes is spent in darkness. So the electricity will be available for 2 minutes and disappear for 5 minutes. We saw it ourselves because we could not even use our public address machines when we were there. So, Mr. Speaker, we need a total review and overhaul of this particular energy sector, and I'm willing and happy that I'm willing to support my chairman, and I'm happy that I'm part of the Committee on Energy. This simply cannot, that you say we're benefiting from the subsidy. He knows that he used to buy kerosene at 127 because there was a
Samson Kiprotich.
Mr. Speaker, thank you for this opportunity. Mr. Speaker, I agree that there is still a problem, largely with the expensive energy, both Kenya Power and, of course, the cost of fuel, which continues to drive the cost of electricity up. In Nandi, as we have been told, Mr. Speaker, we have over 800 faulty transformers in Nandi alone. So you can imagine we have suffered massive losses, apart from even usage of electricity to read also our products. You know, we use cooling cooling plants that are used to cooling milk. And I know Senator Ledama is happy to listen to this. 800 transformers, Mr. Speaker, it is very unfortunate. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, somebody somewhere must be held accountable, and I hope the DPP must ensure the conclusion and prosecution of the people who acquired these faulty transformers are brought to book, because in Nandi, almost the ones that were put in primary schools, they are faulty. I receive phone calls. We try to work around it, Mr. Speaker, and I think it is important that the prosecution of those people who participated in purchase of faulty transformers comes to a conclusion. Number two, Mr. Speaker, we need to open the monopoly. I agree with the committee that let us open the monopoly of Kenya Power, allow KenGen to sell directly, Mr. Speaker. The third point I want to make, Mr. Speaker, is on the independent power producers. Why do we use $1 to buy from them? Why don't we use Kenya shillings so that we save this money, Mr. Speaker? And these IPPs sometimes are generated here in Kenya. So, Mr. Speaker, we must use the Kenya shillings. And finally, we must move to renewable energy. We need to zero rate. I remember in last session, we fought so hard to ensure that we have zero-rated solar purchase panels and installation, Mr. Speaker, so that in as much like areas that have been mentioned by the chair, the northern part, there is a lot of sun there, Mr. Speaker. We can still use that renewable energy through solar energy by providing a zero-rated, Mr. Speaker. But I want to confirm to the country and this House as I conclude, Mr. Speaker, the Kenya Kwanza is committed in ensuring that the cost of energy and power comes down, Mr. Speaker. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Cherargei. I hope you are not directing the DPP. As you are aware, the office of the DPP under Article 157 of the Constitution is independent of any direction. I believe your statement was not a direction to the DPP. Thank you very much. Honorable Senator Olekina Ledama from Narok, kindly.
Mr. Speaker, let me begin by thanking my chair for bringing this very, very important statement. Mr. Speaker, I was a member of the Energy Committee in the last Parliament, and we did quite a lot of work in regards to trying to deal with the issue of cost of electricity. One of the biggest problems that we had was that Kenya Power and Lighting Company borrowed money in US dollars currency at very, very high interest rates. I think one of the things that we must do now is to be able to pursue so that we can be able to reduce those or refinance those loans so that we can be able to tackle that issue that way. Mr. Speaker, the second big problem that I hope that our committee and the Senate will be able to assist us to be able to deal with is the issue of faulty transformers. The issue of faulty transformers, Mr. Speaker, is like musical chairs, a blame game, where REREC says that when we handed over electricity to Kenya Power and Lighting, the transformers were faulty. When you go to Kenya Power and Lighting, they say that we were never handed over this electricity. So we need to be able to carry out an audit to establish, first of all, two things. Number one, we need to know, out of the 47 counties, what is the access to electricity in each and every county. That is issue number one. Number two, Mr. Speaker, because our time is limited on this matter, is that we now must support this issue of doing away with the monopoly of Kenya Power. In Narok County, Mr. Speaker, Transmara Sugar Company can produce electricity and sell that electricity in the whole of Narok County using bagasse. Mr. Speaker, 30 more seconds, please. Mr. Speaker, we need, and I'm happy that the President talked about trying to look at this environment of electricity monopoly by Kenya Power and Lighting. We need to be able to have more off-takers. That's issue number one. Number two, we need to encourage more mini-grids in our country. If Narok County, the bagasse, because I hear a lot of people complaining that the Transmara Sugar Company is releasing the bagasse into the river. If we encourage, and I know that they have used charcoal, you know, briquettes, that can be able to be used so that we reduce the use of electricity. So, Mr. Speaker, this is a matter
The Honorable Senator, your time is up, and thank you for being a compliant Senator. The Honorable Senator for Tana River, Mungatana, Danson, Boya. Honorable Senator, have you pressed the MIC button? Then you had not. Now it is on. Go ahead. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, thank you for giving me 2 minutes. And I will go straight to the point. Mr. Speaker, these IPPs, the independent power producers who signed very punitive and unconscionable contracts against the people of Kenya, these people signed these documents with people within government. They were officers within government. There were people working in the energy sector, mandated to protect Kenyans. Instead, they colluded to create contracts that our chairman for energy said, even when the units are not being consumed, they will still be paid. Mr. Speaker, we need to pick it up from where the chairman said that we need to look at who are these people who signed, who did these mistakes. Are they now relaxing somewhere as we are bearing the cost, like Honorable Sifuna said? We are all suffering, Mr. Speaker, because of some people who deliberately colluded with these IPPs, Mr. Speaker, to corruptly acquire
wealth, Mr. Speaker. Because every person who entered this industry, at that time when they were creating some artificial shortages, they made billions of shillings, Mr. Speaker. And to hear that these contracts are going all the way 27 years, Mr. Speaker, some of the people who signed these contracts are just there enjoying themselves as the rest of this country is paying this debt. Mr. Speaker, I would encourage the Energy Committee to bring back historical injustice to be corrected. Mr. Speaker, I repeat, we need to correct some of this because it is the only way that we are going to set the standard for future people who be serving in this industry, and they are given the mandate by the people of Kenya to act in their best interest, not the way these people have done. Mr. Speaker, prosecutions must be called. People must be taken and they must account. I beg to support. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Honorable Mungatana, for your comments on the statement. Senator for Homa Bay, Kajwang Moses Otieno.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, this is a very, very important statement, and I want to congratulate the chair of the Energy Committee for bringing it before the Senate. Energy and transport infrastructure are very, very important conditions for sustainable growth. And Mr. Speaker, with Kenya generating about 3,000 megawatts, I don't think that that will take us to our desired position of being a truly middle income economy. Mr. Speaker, I want to urge the chair to look at the distinction between policy implementation and oversight. As Senate, our role will be to oversight the actions of the executive and the actions of state players. I want to encourage the Energy Committee to borrow a leaf from the first Senate that set up a special inquiry into the affairs of Kenya Airways. That generated a report that came to the floor of this House, and I'd like the chair to perhaps consider taking that approach so that you can call all these IPPs, you can interrogate all the reports that are within this space, and you can bring an actionable report before this House. Mr. Speaker, I also wish that the Energy Committee would look at the regulatory framework in terms of those who wish to put electricity into the national grid. I've got two investors in my county. One was setting up a 40-megawatt solar plant in Nyakwere Hills, the border of Homa Bay and Kisumu. Mr. Speaker, he was frustrated by the regulators, despite securing a lot of funding from the US government, and that project did not kick off. We had another investor who set up a mini-grid on Remba Island. And Mr. Speaker, that mini-grid had to be shut down by the regulator simply because they had not followed some paperwork and they had not ticked some boxes. So let's have a regulatory framework that makes it easy and cheap and efficient for Kenyans to supply electricity in the national grid, rather than one that favors the IPPs that have been demonstrated to be capturing the state. Mr. Speaker, I support this statement.
Thank you very much, Honorable Senator Kajwang. Senator Mandago Jackson Kiblagat was in Gishu.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I support the statement by the chair of the Energy Committee. And Mr. Speaker,
Senator, you are not.
yes, Mr. Speaker, it is so sad that in this country we can have contracts of IPPs that are so punitive to the nation, Mr. Speaker, consuming thermal power. Mr. Speaker, as you are aware, the issue of climate change and the need for renewable clean energy in the globe is not only a concern of the human race, Mr. Speaker, but it's also, Mr. Speaker, a cheaper way of generating energy, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would like the Energy Committee to also look into the various tariffs and regulations that has made it so difficult, Mr. Speaker, for renewable energy, particularly the solar energy, to be used in this country, Mr. Speaker. As you are aware, Mr. Speaker, recently taxes were levied upon solar products, making it expensive, Mr. Speaker, to generate energy through the natural resource of solar, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it is surprising that Kenya Power can make millions of losses, Mr. Speaker, when it is a monopoly that is selling power to the citizens of this country, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in the statement of the Chair for Energy, he has alluded to the Electrocana wind power, supplying energy to various counties, Mr. Speaker. I do support that, Mr. Speaker, but on the same note, that Lake Victoria wind power must be investigated, Mr. Speaker. As you are aware, that is part of the projects that caused electricity bills to be increased arbitrarily by Kenya Power to cover the losses that they generated and created through the Lake Turkana wind power, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, there is need for Kenya Power to optimize on the transformers already in various parts of this country, Mr. Speaker, where you will find one transformer serving 2 families, Mr. Speaker, while the transformer's capacity to serve more than 200 households, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Kenya Power should concentrate in optimizing the already existing transformers as they look into the faulty transformers, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, they should also...
Cheru, you've signed in as Madzayo, Stewart Mashiru, Senator for Kilifi. Very well. I hope then you will properly represent the office of the acting.
Yes. Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I stand in for the minority leader who has been called for a few urgent matters. I think that I wanted to humbly say, and this one, chair of the Energy Committee, it's very critical that issues of energy and food are some of the issues that are directly related to policy, as my brother Senator Kajwang of Mutembei had said. And I think that is critical that where we find ourselves today as a nation, even as you consider this matter, the chair of Energy Committee, it's very critical that you find a nexus with the executive. Because the moment you have declared that food and energy have to go to the market, then it is subject to market forces. Because the high cost of energy that we see today in the country is truly as a function of demand and supply as we see it. Because if you look at the regulator in our economy today, EPRA basically uses the 3 adjustment indices or variables to look at energy prices. They use the fuel, this is confusing, but it's fine. They use fuel, forex, and inflation. But this fuel surcharge, for instance, which is the biggest variable in energy issues, has been skyrocketed highest in the last month, where we have seen a historic 6.7 rise in the cost of surcharge, because these issues have been left to the market forces. I think it is critical that the nexus, just 1 minute, Mr. Speaker, enjoying the rights of the minority leader. I think that it's critical that we review the policy that energy in its all senses should not be considered an issue of consumption. It is an issue of production, because if the president chooses, for instance, to say that we are going to subsidize things like fertilizer and not energy, which directly goes to production, then as a country, we are born to have these kind of problems. Because you remember that in January, when the former president cut these energy issues, for the first time, last month is when we saw the increase in energy with about 15.7%. So I think that just find a way of ensuring that there's a nexus between policy that defines the issue of subsidies on energy as a function of production instead of a function of consumption. Then
Senator, thank you very much. Senator Karungo Thangwa Paul Kiambu.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I think as a House, we stand a very good chance of liberating this nation. by coming up with the legislations that are going to help the executive lower the cost of energy or electricity in this country. Mr. Speaker, I remember during the President's address to this House, he mentioned that he's going to allow cooperatives to generate power and to sell power within their areas of operations. Mr. Speaker, I would urge the committee, as we try to lower the cost of energy in this country, to explore what the President meant by that, so that at least we can allow those who are able to form cooperatives and generate power. Maybe they come from areas where there is a high speed of water flow. Maybe they can use solar and generate power. Maybe the counties themselves can turn waste to energy. And the kind of energy they use, the remaining, or I'm looking for the right word, they can hook it to the national grid. So, Mr. Speaker, I believe there is so many things we can explore from what the President meant during his address. And I believe this committee is up to the task, and we can come up with a legislation that will help lower the cost of production and lower the cost of energy in this country. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Tangwa. Senator Oyomo Beatrice Akinyi.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for giving me the chance. I support from the onset the statement by the chairman of the Energy Committee. Honorable Speaker, my heart bleeds each time there's a mention of faulty transformers. In Mutembei County, where I come from, all the transformers that were brought to the county were all faulty. 3/4 of them were faulty. It is so unfortunate that transformers were supplied and taken to schools under the last mile connectivity program. And it is so unfortunate that those transformers, 3/4 of them, remain inactive, rendering our schools dark and all the public facilities on which these transformers were built. Honorable Speaker, it is also worth noticing that energy is an enabler of development. And as I support, I would like to also insist that the Rural Electrification Authority must also answer for all the transformers that remain inactive in this country, and particularly Mutembei County, where I come from. Our people did not get value for money with the supplies of the transformers, and it is unfortunate somebody was paid for this supply, and our place remains dark. I support.
Thank you very much, Senator Beatrice. Senator Keroche Tabith Karanja.
I also want to thank the chairman chairman on the energy, Senator Wamatangi, for bringing this important statement, because I know Kenya Kwanza has in its plan, they have on how they are going to bring energy down. Bringing energy down means lowering the manufacturing cost and ensuring that we lower the cost of living. But now mine is to mention that Naivasha, and particularly Nakuru County, produces 50% of the energy or the power that we use in the whole of the country. And when you come around at Naivasha, even at night, you find it's dark. There's no street lights. The people living around there, they have no power. In their rural areas, you find there's no power. So I'm so happy and welcoming the new energy minister. Even as we talk of lowering the energy, the power, we should be talking of where that energy comes from. That is Nakuru County, the Kengen, geothermal, or Karia, where we produce 50% of all the energy that is used here in Kenya. So it means Nakuru, Naivasha, Nakuru County should be given cheaper, lower rate than any other part of this country. And we'll be pushing for that, we'll be fighting for that to ensure that we as the producers, we enjoy and we enjoy that resource comes from Nakuru County, particularly Naivasha. So, thank you, Wamatangi. We'll be talking more on this because I'll be pushing to ensure that Nakuru County, the energy rate becomes lower than any other part of this country, because that is where the energy is coming from. Thank you, and we'll be seeing you many times. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much, Senator Tabith Karanja. I want us to close on this, but I'm seeing there is one last request by Senator Asige. So I'll invite Senator Asige Kokegehi Crystal to also give her comments on the statement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I wanted to chime in on this discussion about energy. I am a person that likes to ask questions because questions leads to research and research leads to more knowledge. On the comments that have been made about solar power is incredibly useful, especially for tropical countries like we have in Africa that have a lot of solar energy throughout the year. However, Mr. Speaker, I believe the issue with solar energy is not the 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Solar that we do get and can harness, especially if you have a use case. I think the problem begins at night, Mr. Speaker, because at night, when it comes to nighttime, it means that we need lithium batteries in order to store that solar power that has been harnessed during the day. And in my research, Mr. Speaker, lithium companies are selling their batteries at extraordinary rates, and that is actually the problem. So when we're looking into, and when the Committee of Energy is looking into solar power and how we can harness it more here in the country, we need not look at it being an all-encompassing positive through getting solar energy, but we also need to look on the flip side, Mr. Speaker, which is how are we going to store this energy, because that is the problem. In South Africa, I believe that just in the last year, they used around 100 megawatts of solar energy because they have more technology around lithium batteries. But in Kenya, I believe last year we used maybe just 30 to 40 megawatts. I think the issue is, and should be looked into, the pricing. How can we work together with these lithium companies to make their prices lower? Because, Mr. Speaker, if an average household was to put up solar panels and also get lithium batteries to store in the evenings, then they would have about 6 to 7 years of payback rate to cover the expense that they have incurred from buying these batteries. But for a company, for a factory, for an organization, university, one that uses a lot of solar power and has the money to afford these batteries, they could pay back in about 2 years' time. So when we're looking at solar power, to the chair of the Energy Committee, I would also encourage that we look into lithium batteries and how we can make them more affordable, not just to big companies and factories that can afford it, but also to the smaller households across the country. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Asige. I was generous to allow you to go beyond the time I had allowed the rest of the senators, because I wanted to listen to the cost of lithium and how the cost is generally exorbitant. Lastly, Senator Mundigi Alex Munyi. I'll lock you out in the next 1 minute. Go ahead, Senator.
yangu ni kuunga mjadala wa Matinga mkono, kwa sababu katika Kenya kama kuna watu wameumia ni watu wa Embu County, majimbo ya Embu, kwa sababu hapo mwanzo mambawa ya maji imetoka Embu, Kiambere Dam, Masinga Dam, Gitaru Dam na Kindaruma Dam. Yangu ni kusema kama hiyo mambo itaendelea vizuri, ni watu wa Embu waangaliwe vizuri, kwa sababu upande wa chini mbele hakuna stima, kwa sababu kunasemekana kuna KenGen wa kugenerate na wale wengine wa kuuza. Kwa hivyo naunga mkono serikali ya Kenya Kwanza, kama hiyo mambo itaenda vizuri, jimbo la Embu liwe ya kwanza kuangaliwa, ndio tuweze kuwa tukilipa usuru, tukipata stima kila pahali pote, kwa sababu hata chakula na mambo ya elimu pia, hata hiyo mambo ya umeme, hizo damu singekuwa zinasaidia sisi ndio tuweze kuendelea vizuri. Hata maji ya kilimo wao wakitupatia, ingawa tunajua ni private company, lakini kuna mambo mengine huko wanavaa wao wakituangalilia. Kwa hiyo mto ya kutoka Masinga, Gitaru, Kamburu kwenda huko chini. Asante sana Bwana Speaker.
Thank you very much, Senator. When honorable members, I want us to move to the next order, and that is pass on to standing order number 5-7. Yes, next statement, sorry, not order, sorry, yes. I want to call upon the Senate Majority Leader to issue a statement on the business of the Senate for the week commencing Tuesday, November 8th, 2022. Next order, please.
Mr. Speaker, sir, pursuant to Standing Order 57-1, I hereby present to the Senate the business of the Senate for the week commencing Tuesday, 8th November 2022. Mr. Speaker, signs with the Senate calendar approved on 12th October 2022, the Senate is scheduled to proceed for a short recess between 28th October and 7th November 2022. Regular sittings of the Senate will therefore resume on Tuesday, 8th November 2022. On that day, the Senate Business Committee will meet to reschedule the business of the Senate. This is projected to contain business that will not be concluded from today's order paper and any other business scheduled by the committee. The order paper for Wednesday, 9th November 2022, and for Thursday, 10th November 2022, will contain business that will not be concluded on Tuesday, 8th November 2022, and on Wednesday, 9th November 2022, respectively, as well as petitions and statements and any other business scheduled by the Senate Business Committee. Mr. Speaker, sir, during the recess period, several activities have been lined